One of the big things I found is that people, straight society, said, oh, well, there's not many of you.
Everybody who I interviewed said, I've never talked to anybody about this before. It was this big underground thing that was happening that nobody knew anything about.
All I was looking for was answers for myself. I had no particular desire or idea of being an activist.
I had realized that something was doable back when the Jorgensen case broke in '53.
I was 12 when Christine Jorgensen's story hit the headlines, and my only wonder was, gee, there are people who feel that way, only they're the opposite. I wonder if they do these kind of surgeries for people like me.
And not being able to find any information meant that there were a whole lot of other people out there like me that couldn't have any information, and I just couldn't walk away from it.
When I was trying to find anything, the only real source that I found was in the adult bookstore. You would stumble on an article in one of these drag magazines about a function or a party or a convention.
There was literally no role models, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
It's all about survival. We could meet, but we had to meet secretly.
Everybody was really super worried about confidentiality. The locations of meetings were not publicly available. Nobody published their whole name. Everybody went by just an initial and a last name, or just two initials, or their first name and a last initial.
You can be assisted by hearing from folk who have had to find places in the culture which were not initially permitted to them.
I began writing to Mario Martino. I also got in contact with Rupert Raj. Just the three of us in those years were the only people who were out and open and really in the FTM community known enough for other people to contact.
I'd met Lou Sullivan, so I knew he was like the only gay trans man I knew about.
He founded an organization called FTM International. He communicated with people by mail.
I was in the lesbian community originally for 10 years, and I didn't identify as a lesbian, though. I identified as Stone Butch. After I met Lou Sullivan, I knew that I was a transgender man.
And he wrote all day, every day, it seemed like. He was constantly communicating with people.
He had asked me a week before he died to take over his newsletter. I'm having to produce this thing, and I'm having to think about this, and I'm getting communication from all these people, and I'm thinking, we have to be public. We cannot be so closeted. We will never get our needs met. We will never make the world safe for us to be different if nobody knows who we are. People don't understand us.
And now, thinking about the access to services, one thing I learned was that if it isn't there, you make it yourself. So we made these connections.
We have to be nationally organized.
So I founded a nonprofit called the American Educational Gender Information Service.
So here I am, I'm in a meeting that had 71 people show up, and the name of the group became the International Foundation for Gender Education.
The Sherburne Health Centre here in Toronto was just starting out to engage in the trans community. We established the first intake protocol.
So they come to Fanfare, and there are these meetings run by licensed therapists. So many people are helped by it to gain confidence. Great institution.
CHAT, Community Homophile Association of Toronto.
CHAT is where I remember coming in contact with transsexuals for the first time.
I said, are you doing transgendered people? He said, well, I don't know enough about it. So I said, well, I do. I set up the Association for Canadian Transsexuals.
At some point, I published a little squib in the newsletter saying, okay, I'm going public, because I think we need to let people know that we're out here.
The first time I saw anyone like myself, I was 11, and it was a Dean Martin show. He was having a roast, and one of the guests on the roast was Dr. Renee Richards.
Thank you, Dean. It's nice to be here with you and all these ladies and gentlemen and anyone in between.
That was the first person that I identified with, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm like her.
When I did the TV shows, I had one that started off bad. Then after I made a couple remarks, the host looked over at me and says, "You're for real." And then he changed his whole tune. And after that, we had a good exchange.
What's the reason you're here? What's the point that you want to make? What's the redeeming social value of this program? Because you've got a lot of folks in the bar out there at the TikTok lounge saying, here we go again with those queers and crazos he's got on his show. Now, what do I say to those people?
The one is that this is one of many expressions of human experience in the world, whether people want to accept it, reject it, pass judgment on it. This is a real part of the world that we live in.
Human Outreach and Achievement Institute is Ariadne Kane's organization. Cross-dressers to have a community of people who share common interests and oppressions, I suppose you could say.
IFGE always had the web. When we opened up the office in Boston, we had a military modem. This was in 1988.
The next thing we knew, the internet came along, and it was 1996 when we went online on the internet. I reached a point where I couldn't do it all myself. It was too big.
It's 1995 we're talking about, and it was very early in the beginning of the internet. And I could have conversations online with people. I discovered that there were cross-dressing clubs. I had no idea there were. In Iowa City, Iowa, there's a cross-dressing club, and we went bowling in drag. And